They called my innovative plan trash, so I resurrected it in secret. My boss thought he was funding print ads, but I was building a digital empire with his millions. The air in the boardroom was so thick with unspoken judgment, you could have carved it with a letter opener. On one side of the gleaming mahogany table was me, a 28-year-old senior marketing strategist with a folder full of what I believed was pure, unadulterated genius. On the other side, enthroned in his high-backed leather chair, was Mark Renshaw, our VP of Marketing. Mark was a relic from the age of print ads and 3 martini lunches, a man whose idea of innovation was changing the font on our quarterly mailer from Times New Roman to Helvetica. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. For the past 6 months, I'd poured every spare ounce of my energy into this proposal. I called it Project Echo. It was a complete overhaul of our marketing strategy for Heritage Home, our company that sold beautifully crafted but painfully traditional home goods. We were losing ground to younger, nimbler online brands, and everyone knew it, but no one wanted to admit it. Project Echo was the answer. It was a multi-pronged digital campaign built around community, authenticity, and engagement. It involved interactive online design tools, partnerships with niche interior design influencers, the ones with real dedicated followings, and a user-generated content campaign that would turn our own customers into our best advocates. It was ambitious, it was modern, and it was, I was certain, exactly what we needed. I just finished my 20-minute presentation, my voice still ringing with passion as I clicked to the final slide, a projection showing a conservative 40% increase in online engagement and a 25% lift in sales within the first quarter of implementation. I looked up, a hopeful, expectant smile on my face, ready for the questions, the discussion, the dawn of a new era for Heritage Home. Mark just stared at me. He hadn't touched the detailed proposal I'd placed in front of him. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning in protest, and steepled his fingers under his chin. The silence stretched, becoming a weapon. The other 2 executives in the room, sycophants of the highest order, looked from Mark to me and back again, their expressions carefully neutral, waiting for their cue. Finally, Mark picked up my beautifully bound proposal. He held it between his thumb and forefinger like it was a dirty diaper. He didn't open it. He just let it dangle in the air for a moment before dropping it onto the table with a soft, dismissive thud. "That's it?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "That's the master plan? TikTok dances and paying kids in their bedrooms to talk about our handcrafted mahogany armoires?" I felt a flush of heat creep up my neck. "It's not about TikTok dances, Mark," I said, trying to keep my tone respectful. "It's about meeting our customers where they are. It's about building a brand identity that resonates with a new generation of homeowners. The data shows—" He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Data. I've been selling furniture since before your data was a twinkle in a Silicon Valley nerd's eye. I know our customer. Our customer is a 55-year-old man named Steven, who reads the Wall Street Journal and plays golf on Saturdays. He doesn't care about your influencers or your user-generated content." "With respect," I countered, my voice tighter now, "Steven is not our future. His children are. And they're furnishing their homes right now, and they're not looking at us. They're looking at brands that feel authentic, that they can connect with." Mark actually chuckled. It was a low, grating sound that made my skin crawl. He slid the proposal across the table with the back of his hand, sending it spinning towards me. It stopped just at the edge, teetering. "Authenticity," he sneered, savoring the word like a piece of spoiled meat. "You want to know what's authentic? A full-page ad in a glossy magazine, a 30-second spot during the evening news. That's brand power, that's prestige. This—" He gestured vaguely at my folder. "This is noise. It's cheap. It's desperate." He stood up then, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the table. He walked over to the wastebasket by the door, a sleek stainless steel cylinder that probably cost more than my first car. He turned back to look at me, his eyes cold and flat. "These ideas," he declared, his voice booming in the quiet room, "are trash." And then he did it. He walked back to the table, picked up my proposal, 6 months of my life, my evenings, my weekends, and he walked back to the bin and dropped it in. The sound of the paper hitting the metal bottom echoed like a gunshot. A hot, bitter wave of humiliation washed over me. I couldn't breathe. The 2 other executives suddenly found the ceiling tiles incredibly fascinating. No one said a word. My career, my vision, my hard work was literally in the garbage. "Now," Mark said, dusting his hands together as if he'd just handled something unsanitary, "we're going with a Heritage Legacy campaign, print ads, a new slogan, something classic like timeless quality for the discerning home. I want full-page mock-ups on my desk by Monday. You can handle that, can't you?" He wasn't asking. It was an order, a punishment. He was burying me in the very thing I was trying to save the company from, irrelevance. I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. The meeting was over. I was dismissed. I walked back to my desk in a daze, the sympathetic, pitying looks from my colleagues burning into my back. I sat down, staring at my monitor. The Project Echo folder was still open on my screen. All the files, the research, the spreadsheets, the creative briefs. My masterpiece. Mark had called it trash. He'd thrown it away. My first instinct was to drag the entire folder to the recycle bin on my desktop to delete every trace of it and my own failure. My cursor hovered over the folder, the little arrow trembling with my own suppressed rage and despair. I was about to click, to erase the last 6 months and resign myself to a future of designing boring ads for a dying brand. But then, an email popped up on my screen. It was from the IT department. The subject line read, "Urgent server maintenance and update to ad spend allocation software this weekend." I stared at the email. Then I stared at the folder named Project Echo. My mind started racing, connecting dots I hadn't even seen before. The ad spend software, the weekend maintenance, Mark's complete and utter dismissal of my digital-first plan. He hadn't just rejected it. He had publicly declared it worthless. He wouldn't look for it. He wouldn't even think about it. He had, in his arrogance, given me the one thing I didn't have before, complete and total camouflage. An idea began to form in the pit of my stomach, a tiny, dangerous spark of defiance. I moved the cursor away from the delete button. Slowly, deliberately, I right-clicked on the Project Echo folder. But I didn't select delete. I selected rename. A blinking cursor appeared. I typed a new name. Q3 Print Media Archive, do not delete. I hit enter. Then I opened a new, blank document. I wasn't just going to prove him wrong. I was going to use his own ignorance of the digital world against him. He wanted a legacy campaign? Oh, I'd give him a legacy, all right. But the golden mountains it would build wouldn't be for him. They'd be for me. The rest of that Friday was a blur of performative misery. I nodded meekly in meetings, fetched coffee for the sycophants who had watched my public execution without blinking, and started sketching out the most mind-numbingly bland print ads imaginable. A solitary leather armchair in a wood-paneled library, a perfectly set dining table with no food on it. The taglines I came up with were masterpieces of corporate nothingness, heritage home furnishing your legacy, enduring quality, timeless design. Mark would love them. He'd probably frame one and hang it in his office. It was the perfect camouflage. No one suspects the beaten dog of having sharp teeth. All weekend, my apartment became a war room. The lights were off, the blinds were drawn, and the only illumination came from my 3 monitors, casting a ghostly blue glow on the conspiracy unfolding across them. I lived on black coffee and the cold, burning fire of pure adrenaline. My plan was audacious, borderline insane, and hinged on one beautiful, simple fact. Mark and his executive cronies were dinosaurs. They understood paper invoices and insertion orders. The inner workings of our digital ad spend allocation software were, to them, a form of black magic. The upcoming server maintenance was my Trojan horse. For 48 hours, the system would be in a transitional state, a digital limbo, where the old protocols were being phased out and the new ones weren't fully active yet. It had warned that any campaign scheduled during this window might experience unpredictable behavior upon reactivation. For most, this was a warning to stay away. For me, it was a wide-open door. Mark had approved a massive 7-figure budget for the Heritage Legacy print campaign. My job was to log into the allocation software and create purchase orders for dozens of magazines: Architectural Digest, The Robb Report, Town & Country. The system would then generate payment requests for our accounts department. But here's the beautiful part. The system was old. You could create a master budget line, call it Q3 National Print Media Buy, and then attach dozens of smaller individual payment instructions to it. The summary report that Mark would see would just show the total amount spent under that one, approved heading. He'd never look at the granular data. He wouldn't even know how. So that's what I did. I spent hours creating a ghost campaign. I built the entire Heritage Legacy structure in the system, complete with fake insertion order numbers and placeholders for print ad creative. It looked completely legitimate. Anyone who glanced at it would see a perfectly executed, if painfully boring, traditional media plan. But then I went deeper. I used the system's obscure back-end tools to create a series of sub-allocations. I funneled 80% of that 7-figure budget away from the ghost print campaign. I created new vendor profiles, not for magazines, but for digital ad networks and payment processors. I disguised them with innocuous names: Global Creative Placement Services, Strategic Audience Engagement Corp. They sounded exactly like the kind of bland, overpriced agencies Mark loved to hire. These new vendors, however, weren't agencies. They were direct payment gateways to the ad accounts I had secretly set up for Facebook, Instagram, Google, and a handful of premium lifestyle websites. The money wasn't going to Condé Nast. It was going into a war chest to fund Project Echo. I uploaded all my vibrant, user-focused creative. I finalized the list of micro-influencers and drafted their contracts, ready to be sent out with a single click. I built the entire digital ecosystem I had proposed in my meeting, every last detail, but this time it was hidden behind layers of corporate bureaucracy and technical jargon. By Sunday night, my eyes were burning and my hands were shaking from caffeine, but it was done. Project Echo was a loaded gun, cocked and aimed, waiting for the system to come back online Monday morning. All the allocations, all the creative, all the scheduled posts and ad buys were preloaded. When the servers rebooted, my project would launch automatically, a silent digital blitzkrieg unleashed on the world, while Mark was sipping his morning coffee, smugly waiting for mock-ups of a mahogany desk. There was only one final step. To make it all go live, I had to submit the entire budget package for final processing before the maintenance window closed at midnight. Once submitted, the allocations were locked. There was no undoing it. I stared at the screen, at the two campaigns sitting side by side in the system. The Heritage Legacy campaign, a hollow shell containing only 20% of its supposed budget. And next to it, the series of cryptically named sub-campaigns that held the real money, the real plan. My plan. My mouse hovered over the Submit Final Q3 Budget button. This was it. This was the moment of treason. I wasn't just breaking the rules. I was committing corporate espionage against my own boss, wagering millions of the company's dollars on my own conviction. If I was caught, I wouldn't just be fired. The scale of this deception, legal action was a certainty. They could ruin me. But the thought of Mark's smug face, the thud of my work hitting the bottom of that trash can, it was more than enough fuel. My finger trembled as it rested on the left mouse button. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. The digital clock in the corner of my screen flipped to 11:59 p.m. It was now or never. I took one last shuddering breath, tasting the bitter tang of coffee and rebellion. Then I closed my eyes and clicked. The page refreshed, displaying a small green banner with 2 simple words: "Submission successful." A wave of cold terror and exhilarating freedom washed over me at the same time. I had done it. The bomb was planted. I leaned back in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stared at my dark reflection in the blank monitor. Now all I had to do was walk into the office tomorrow and pretend I was nothing more than the loyal soldier Mark thought he had beaten into submission. Walking into the office on Monday morning was like walking onto a movie set where I was the only one who knew the shocking third act twist. The air smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation, the same as any other Monday. My colleagues shuffled past, offering weak smiles. No one had a clue that while they were binge-watching TV shows and mowing their lawns, a digital revolution had been quietly launched from my dimly lit apartment. My trash was now live, coursing through the veins of the internet, funded by millions of dollars Mark thought were earmarked for glossy magazine pages. I spent the morning meticulously crafting the world's most uninspired print ads. I chose the most stock photo-looking family imaginable to sit on a heritage home sofa, their smiles painfully artificial. I wrote copy so bland it could have been used to sedate a charging rhino. At 10 a.m., I walked to Mark's office and placed the mock-ups on his desk with the feigned reverence of a humble servant. He glanced at them, a grunt of satisfaction escaping his lips. "Good," he said, not even looking at me. "This is what our brand is about. Solid, dependable, no nonsense." He tapped a picture of a staid-looking dining room set. "This one. Let's run with this one. Get it over to the publisher for the October issue of Classic Interiors." "Right away, Mark," I said, my voice a perfect blend of diligence and defeat. The beauty of my plan was its slow, creeping invisibility. Print ads have a long lead time. The ads I was booking wouldn't appear for weeks, even months. The invoices wouldn't be processed until then. By the time anyone in accounting noticed a discrepancy between the funds allocated and the invoices received, my campaign would have already run its course. I had a window of about 4 weeks. 4 weeks to prove my point so spectacularly that the consequences of my insubordination would be overshadowed by the sheer scale of my success. Or 4 weeks to dig my own professional grave so deep they'd need an excavator to find my body. The first few days were agony. I was a nervous wreck, compulsively refreshing the real-time analytics dashboards I had set up on a hidden partition of my work computer. Project Echo launched in phases. Phase 1 was the influencer outreach, small, tasteful gift boxes with personalized notes and a single beautiful heritage home product, a handcrafted vase, a set of linen napkins, arrived at the homes of 50 carefully selected interior design influencers. There was no obligation to post. The goal was genuine surprise and delight. By Tuesday afternoon, the first mention appeared. A designer with 200,000 highly engaged followers posted an Instagram story. It was a simple unboxing video. "Whoa, okay, Heritage Home, I see you," she said, her voice filled with genuine surprise. "This is gorgeous." She ran her hand over the piece, the sunlight catching the grain of the wood. It was authentic. It was real. It was everything our brand wasn't supposed to be. Then another post appeared, and another. Hashtag Heritage Rediscovered started trending in a small, niche way. My user-generated content campaign kicked in next. We launched a Show Us Your Heritage contest on Instagram and Pinterest, with a prize of a full-room redesign. The interactive design tool on our website, a feature I'd built with a freelance programmer using a fraction of the budget, went live. Suddenly, our website traffic, which usually flatlined from Monday to Friday, started to climb. By the end of the first week, the numbers were unlike anything the company had ever seen. Our social media engagement was up 800%. Website traffic from social channels had tripled. The design tool had been used over 50,000 times. We weren't just getting clicks. We were getting saves, shares, comments. People were talking about us. Young people. People with new houses and disposable income. I sat in my cubicle, surrounded by the monotonous hum of the office, feeling like I was living in a completely different reality. Mark would occasionally lumber past my desk and ask, "How's that classic interiors ad coming along?" And I'd say, "Just waiting on final proofs, Mark." While on my hidden screen, a real-time graph of our online sales was spiking so hard it looked like an EKG readout during a heart attack. We were selling out of the items the influencers had featured. Our online revenue for the week had surpassed the entire previous month's total. The following week, the wave grew. Mainstream design blogs started picking up on the teen heritage rediscovered trend. An article in a major online shelter magazine was titled, "Is Your Grandma's Favorite Furniture Store Suddenly Cool?" The story praised our brilliant and subtle pivot to digital, celebrating our embrace of the online design community. They called us savvy. They called us smart. They had no idea it was the rogue act of a single disgruntled employee. I was getting bolder. I started diverting more of the print budget to a targeted search ad campaign, bidding on keywords our competitors dominated. By the end of week 3, we were the #1 search result for quality wood furniture, modern heirloom pieces, and a dozen other high-intent phrases. The sales chart no longer looked like an EKG. It looked like a rocket launch. But with great success comes great visibility. I was playing with fire, and the flames were now licking at the ceiling. On the Thursday of the 3rd week, an email landed in my inbox that made my blood run cold. It was from Sarah in accounting. The subject line was innocent enough: "Query re Q3 print media budget." My hands started to shake. I opened the email. It was short and to the point. "Hi," she wrote, "just doing a preliminary review of the Q3 spend. I see the large allocation for Q3 national print media buy was processed, but I haven't received any of the corresponding insertion orders or invoices from the publishers yet. Can you send them over when you get a chance? Just need them for my initial forecast." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The loose thread. Sarah was a stickler for details. "When you get a chance" was accountant speak for now. I had no invoices. They didn't exist. I stared at the screen, my mind a blank wall of panic. I could try to stall, to fake some documents, but that would only buy me a day or two. The lie was too big. The paper trail was a ghost. She would go to Mark. Mark would investigate. And I would be spectacularly, publicly, and probably legally ruined. My 4-week window was about to slam shut. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed. A cold sweat prickled my hairline. Sarah from accounting was a bloodhound. Giving her a flimsy excuse would be like throwing a wounded gazelle a Band-Aid. She'd smell the lie a mile away. Stalling was a temporary solution to a terminal problem. I needed a miracle, or at the very least, a masterclass in corporate deception. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic hummingbird that had taken up residence in my chest. Think, what would Mark do? He'd bluster. He'd delegate. He'd make it someone else's problem. The answer came to me in a flash of cynical brilliance. I wasn't going to lie to Sarah. I was going to overwhelm her. I typed out a reply, my hands moving with newfound confidence. "Hi, Sarah," I wrote. "Of course, things got a bit reshuffled this quarter. Mark initiated a major strategic pivot after our last planning session. We've shifted the bulk of the Q3 budget from traditional print to a new multi-channel digital initiative to test performance. It's under his direct oversight. The spend is allocated across dozens of smaller, performance-based platforms rather than a few big publishers, which is why the invoicing structure looks different. I'm still consolidating all the insertion reports from the various digital vendors. It's a mountain of data. I'll bundle it all up for you once the initial campaign flight is complete at the end of the month. I've CC'd Mark, so he's in the loop." It was a work of art. I used all the right buzzwords: strategic pivot, multi-channel, performance-based. I made the project sound complex and important. Most crucially, I invoked Mark's name as both the architect and the authority. By copying him on the email, I was creating a digital breadcrumb that led directly to his door. Sarah wouldn't question a directive that came from a VP. And Mark? Mark never read emails he was CC'd on, unless they were about his golf handicap. He'd see his name and Sarah's, assume it was boring accounting nonsense, and delete it without a second thought. It was a high-stakes bluff, betting everything on my boss's arrogance and apathy. I held my breath and hit send. The rest of the day was excruciating. Every time I heard the ping of a new email, my stomach would lurch. But there was no reply from Sarah, no thunderous summons from Mark's office. My gamble had paid off. I had bought myself another week, one more week for Project Echo to work its magic. And it was magic. The numbers that were once spectacular were becoming legendary. We had completely sold out of 3 product lines. The warehouse was scrambling to fulfill online orders. The customer service team, used to dealing with complaints about delivery times, was now fielding inquiries from people wanting to know when the vase from that influencer's post would be back in stock. The entire energy of the company was shifting. There was a buzz, a sense of momentum we hadn't felt in years. People in other departments were starting to talk, wondering what the hell the marketing team was doing right. Of course, the credit for this mysterious success was, by default, being laid at Mark's feet. I'd overhear snippets in the break room. Mark Renshaw must have finally pulled his head out of the 1980s. I heard he's a secret genius, playing the long game all this time. I'd just sip my coffee and smile wanly. Let him take the credit. It was the perfect cover. The king could think he was winning the war, unaware that the decisive battle was being fought by a soldier he'd already declared dead. The final week arrived. The month was coming to a close. My D-Day. The financial reports for the month would be run, and my digital house of cards would come crashing down. There would be no more hiding. The numbers would speak for themselves. The line item for Q3 National Print Media Buy would have millions of dollars of expenditure next to it, with 0 corresponding revenue. It would be a catastrophic loss. Meanwhile, the line item for online sales would show an increase so massive, so far beyond any projection, that it would look like a typo. The two numbers would be so diametrically opposed that anyone with a calculator would see that something was fundamentally broken, or fundamentally brilliant. On the last day of the month, a Friday, an urgent meeting request appeared in everyone's inbox. Mandatory all-hands marketing meeting, 4 p.m., main conference room. It was from Mark. This was it. Sarah must have finally gotten tired of waiting and gone to him directly. He knew. He must have seen the preliminary numbers. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had done what I set out to do. I had proven that my ideas weren't trash. Now it was time to face the firing squad. I spent the afternoon cleaning out my desk, discreetly packing my personal belongings into my bag. I saved all the data from Project Echo, every chart, every graph, every glowing comment and sales report, onto a personal flash drive. It was my evidence, my legacy. When I walked into that conference room at 4 p.m., I would go down swinging. The room was packed. Everyone from my department was there, their faces a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Mark stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. But next to him was someone I didn't expect to see. Mr. Harrison, the CEO of the entire company. A man so rarely seen on our floor that his presence was like a solar eclipse. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a firing. This was a public execution. Mark cleared his throat and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice unusually somber. "As you know, we've been facing some serious headwinds as a company. For a long time, our growth has been stagnant." He paused, looking around the room. His eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and I saw a flicker of something I couldn't identify. "However," he continued, "something remarkable has happened this month, something that has, frankly, stunned us all." He gestured to the large screen at the front of the room. He clicked a button and a chart appeared. It was the online sales report for the month, a single blue line that shot up so vertically it looked like a skyscraper. A gasp went through the room. "This month," Mark said, his voice filled with a strange, strained pride, "we have seen a 400% increase in online revenue. We have broken every digital sales record in the company's history." He let that sink in. The room started to buzz with excited whispers. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I was braced for the but. I was waiting for him to point at me and reveal the fraud who had accomplished it. But the but never came. Instead, Mark looked over at Mr. Harrison, the CEO. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, a wide, genuine smile on his face. "This is, without a doubt, the most incredible turnaround I have ever seen," the CEO boomed, his voice radiating pure joy. "Mark, my boy, I never thought you had it in you. When you came to me a month ago and told me you were going to scrap the old ways and secretly funnel your entire print budget into a covert digital-first campaign to prove its efficacy, I thought you were insane. But the numbers don't lie. You've saved this company's future." The entire room erupted in applause, all directed at a stunned-looking Mark. I just sat there, my mind reeling, completely frozen in my chair. Covert campaign? He came to the CEO a month ago? What in the world was happening? Mark caught my eye again across the cheering crowd. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, and his expression was no longer unreadable. It was pure, unadulterated terror. He hadn't known. He hadn't known any of it. The CEO's words weren't a commendation. They were an accusation wrapped in a compliment. And I had just become the only person in the world who could either save him or destroy him. The applause thundered around me, an absurd soundtrack to the silent, frantic conversation happening between my eyes and Mark's. He looked like a man who had just been told he'd won the lottery, but the winning ticket was currently being digested by his dog. The CEO, Mr. Harrison, was beaming, clapping Mark on the back with enough force to dislodge a rib. The narrative had been written in real time, right in front of my eyes. In Mr. Harrison's mind, Mark Renshaw was a Machiavellian genius, a rogue executive who had gambled big and won bigger, all for the good of the company. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. My entire plan had been to expose Mark's incompetence with undeniable data, to hold up my success as a mirror to his failure. I had envisioned a dramatic confrontation, a moment where I would lay my flash drive of evidence on the table and say, "This was me." But this was infinitely more complicated. The CEO hadn't just praised Mark, he had publicly anointed him. To contradict that story now wouldn't make me a hero. It would make me a saboteur, a liar who was trying to steal credit and undermine the company's celebrated new visionary. Mark had inadvertently stumbled into the perfect checkmate. As the applause died down, Mr. Harrison raised his hands. "To celebrate this incredible achievement," he announced, "and to formally recognize the new direction of our company, I am promoting Mark to Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately. His first task will be to build out a new, dedicated digital innovation team to scale this success across the entire organization." More applause. I watched Mark's face. The terror was still there, but it was now mixed with a dawning realization. He was trapped in a golden cage. He had been promoted to a position he was laughably unqualified for, tasked with replicating a success he didn't understand in the slightest. He was a fraud, and he was about to be put in charge of the company's entire future strategy. The meeting finally broke up, and the crowd swarmed Mark, congratulating him. I slipped out, my mind a whirlwind. I didn't go back to my desk. I went to the little-used stairwell at the end of the hall and just stood there, my back against the cool concrete, trying to process the sheer insanity of the last 10 minutes. A few moments later, the door creaked open. It was Mark. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. He closed the door behind him, plunging the small space into dim, quiet privacy. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading expression. The arrogant VP who had thrown my work in the trash was gone. In his place was a terrified man who knew his entire career was hanging by a thread and that I was the one holding the scissors. "How?" was all he managed to get out, his voice barely a whisper. I just stared back at him. I could have laid into him. I could have recited every condescending word he'd ever said to me. I could have told him exactly how I'd used his own ignorance against him. But seeing him so completely broken, I felt an unexpected wave of, not pity, but clarity. My goal was never just to destroy him. It was to prove my ideas were valuable, and in a bizarre, twisted way, I had. "You called them trash," I said, my voice flat and even, "so I put them where the rest of the trash goes, out of sight." He flinched, the memory of his own words hitting him. The server maintenance, the budget allocation software. He trailed off, the pieces finally clicking into place in his analog brain. "You hit it. You ran the entire campaign behind my back." "You said you wanted a legacy campaign," I said, a small, humorless smile touching my lips. "Congratulations on your legacy." He actually staggered back a step, leaning against the railing. "They want me to build a team. To do this again, on a bigger scale." He looked at me, his face pale. "I don't know the first thing about any of it. I don't even know what you did. I'll be exposed as a fraud in a week." This was it. My moment of ultimate leverage. I could ask for anything. A massive raise, a VP title, his new job. I could make him my puppet, but I realized I didn't want any of that. I didn't want to work for Mark or even with him. I wanted to build something new. The company had seen the light, even if they were shining it on the wrong person. The door was now open. "You have a problem, Mark," I said calmly. "You're the new chief strategy officer, and you're a genius, but your genius is eccentric. You're a big picture guy. You don't have time to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of implementation." He stared at me, confused, as I laid out the story he was going to tell. "Your first act as CSO," I continued, "will be to announce the formation of the new Digital Innovation Division. You'll need a director to run it, someone with the vision and the technical expertise to execute your grand strategy. You'll tell Mr. Harrison you have the perfect person in mind, someone you've been secretly mentoring, someone who was instrumental in the covert campaign." His eyes widened as he understood. I wasn't going to expose him. I was going to give him an escape hatch that also happened to be my golden parachute. "The new division will operate as a semi-independent unit." I spelled it out for him. "It will have its own budget, which you will sign off on without question. It will have its own staff, which I will hire. It will report its results directly to you and the CEO. You will be its champion in the boardroom. You will protect it. You will fund it. And you will take all the credit for its success. In return, you will never, ever question my methods or get in my way. I will build your golden mountains for you. All you have to do is stay on top of them and look important." He stared at me, speechless. It was the perfect deal for both of us. He got to keep his job, his reputation, and his massive new salary. I got complete autonomy, a huge budget, and the power to remake the company's marketing from the ground up without any interference. He would be my shield, and I would be his engine. A slow nod was his only answer. The next Monday, an official company-wide announcement went out. Mark Renshaw was the new CSO. His first move was to create the Digital Innovation Team, appointing me, his brilliant protege, as its director. I was given a corner office, a team of 6 to start, and a budget that made my secret slush fund look like pocket change. Mark and I rarely spoke after that day in the stairwell. We had an unspoken agreement. In meetings, he would talk in vague, sweeping terms about synergy and disruption, and then he would turn to me and say, "And my director will now walk us through the tactical execution." I would then present my team's latest successes, the incredible data, the soaring sales charts. The executives would applaud, Mr. Harrison would beam, and they would all congratulate Mark on his incredible foresight. He would just nod, a look of profound wisdom on his face. But sometimes, when no one else was looking, he would catch my eye across the boardroom table, and I would see it again. That flicker of pure, unadulterated terror. He knew, and I knew, that the ideas he once called trash were now the very foundation of the golden throne he was sitting on, and I was the one who had built it.